All right, we're back, man. Let's roll it.
Rolling with it.
Yeah. Finish on a Friday, the 13th. For people who are not from a modern era, I mean, from the old school era, they have no idea what that actually really means.
No,
But
none, zero.
One of the great horror movies of all time.
Of all time. All time.
All time. And what was amazing was no matter what you did to escape Jason, he still got
found you.
Even though he was going incredibly slow.
Extremely slow.
That's what I always loved about those movies, like there was always some sort of like something going on, some teenagers doing something or like college kids doing something, fooling around girls, fooling around guys or whatever, and then all of a sudden you get like all of a sudden Jason appears. Pops up. Yeah, and someone gets messed up. We got a great show today. We have Scott Martin from Shore Sports Network. We're excited to talk to him. We're going to talk Jersey Shore football today. I don't think we've covered really that in depth. I don't think.
Not really. Haven't really looked at it that much.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it because obviously you coaching and I did coach in it. Although I guess I coach in it now in the youth level.
In some way.
In some capacity. But yeah, so we're excited to talk that. And,
and they're doing some new things over there, right?
Yeah.
They're switching some things up, kind of, looking to go, and, kind of bring it up to what, we see a lot of the youth looking for now and what, just the whole newspapers, like, where are they? Like, I don't know, nowhere to be found, man. It's like, I still walk into Wawa and see a newspaper. I'm like, I can't believe these things are even still here. Like,
you try to go through it, right? And it's like, there's nothing in it. It's like, I could get more online.
It's just, look, it is like, I miss that stuff because I like it was.
I loved it.
Like just to open that up and see it and just, I don't know, the smell, like everything. It was just so cool. But hey, adapt or die, right? So let's bring on Scott. Hey, Scott, how are you, man?
Hey, good, Coach. How you guys doing?
Appreciate you coming on, man.
Great to
appreciate you guys having. Thank you.
Jersey Shore football, and obviously you guys cover the Shore Sports Network. You guys covered everything, not just football, obviously, but obviously football is probably your biggest, most explosive season, especially on the website and throughout social media, probably with content and everything like that. When I coached at Red Bank Regional in 2019 and 2020, I had moved down here in 2018 or 17. Before I started coaching down here, I was still coaching up in North Jersey. I was so impressed with the amount of coverage that football in the Jersey Shore got, because we're up in North Jersey, even though football's fantastic. We basically had very limited coverage, and Derek would probably attest to that. But down here, there was so much coverage, I couldn't believe it. And then obviously, once I started coaching, every game, you knew the news, you knew who won, you knew who lost right away. Like you didn't even have to go to you didn't even have to go to like Gridiron, New Jersey, and wait for that to happen. Like we used to have to do, probably still do, I guess, in North Jersey, like because everything doesn't get posted as quickly. But down here, you really got that information, and you're a huge driver in that, and have done a fantastic job with that, with your network. Talk about the kind of genesis of the whole entire Shore Sports Network and coverage down here.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely attribute, the legacy, the history of it to the guy, to Bob Batter, Scott Stone, Matt Manley, all those guys. Tons of respect for them. Obviously they kind of broke off and did their own thing, which is great. I support it. But yeah, so the core of it is this idea of a network being directly connected to a conference or a region or a county, depending on how high school is structured. So, if you think about the Big Ten network, SEC network, that's the concept here, because it's not really happening in high school. I've done a lot of research into it. Because I guess to get back to your question before I get into some of that, is genesis wise for me, I was a special operations flyer in the Air Force, and then while I was still I was flying out of McGuire for a little bit. I was coaching baseball over Southern Regional, just kind of assistant varsity coach, mostly like for sanity and for fun.
Yeah.
And following Matt Manley, they tweeted out that Shore Sports was going under. I made a few phone calls, bought the company more so to save it than anything, just because it seemed like such a value. And my original thought was literally just kind of let it run itself, and I could continue doing some other stuff. And then my love for it blossomed immediately.
Took over, man. It took over.
Especially from that coaching perspective and seeing these kids. And, it's funny. You go from hating this one school to, you're rooting for them and you love them. And it's like, if they're a Shore team, I love them. I love this whole thing. And so it's just really funny how that happens. But then, I started realizing, talking to different athletic directors and different coaches and players and parents, and there was so much information coming at me so fast, and trying to weed through it all. I started doing a little bit of a deeper dive and just realized the power not only of sports, but the power of kids in sports. People care about sports, but people really care about their kids in sports. So, and then kind of looking around, and there's different, like you said, there's not as much going on in the North Jerseys. Either companies spread really wide where they're doing like the whole state, and it's not real, like down to the nitty gritty coverage, or somebody's super locally centralized where maybe it's only a couple schools or a couple programs. And so that, at least with the Shore, the now 48 schools as we welcome New Egypt, it's like kind of that sweet spot of like, okay, we can kind of expand the coverage, and we can highlight more kids, more student athletes, but it's not too much to do it within that one spot. Because, in the past, they really only did 2 boys sports a season. Like that was the model. It was because of football. As long as they were getting paid for whatever the sport was, that's all that mattered. So that wasn't my philosophy. So I brought on girls sports right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
I actually was going field hockey first, just because there were more girls. And then we were going to do a weekly on volleyball. The volleyball just took an absolute whirlwind, and I mean the amount of outreach from that. So I ended up leaning into volleyball a lot more just because of that. And I feel bad. I still want to get field hockey rolling a little bit better, but we'll get there as we bring people on.
Baby steps, right? Like little by little, right? Because you want to do it right as you progress and move forward.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So, and then we, launched a new website. I think there was a lot of limitations on our other website, from like the, schedules, and just being able to actually host the information, even trying to go back in time and looking at stuff. Like there's really like scrolling through that thing, and it glitches out on you, and the ads are everywhere. So it's still early with porting data over, but I'm trying to create this central hub of all Shore Conference information. It's like, I've got people sending me newspaper clips from the 1970s.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So, and that's what I want to do. I don't care. It doesn't have to be like, I think so many people get big on this, like who owns what in this content. I don't care if it's Asbury Park Press, NJ.com, the Sandpaper, Two River Times, any of them. I don't care. Like I'll put their advertisers on there. It's not about that for me. It's about kind of capturing that history and then highlighting it. And so just by creating these more layers in this website now, like we're drilled down, we got like player profiles. It allows us to kind of start highlighting some of those athletes that never got recognition before. Everybody told me, well, first off, girls sports, you're not going to get that much. You're never, and then they'll bring up a school like Lakewood. Lakewood will never send you anything. Well, you know what? The first headshots that a coach sent me outside of me getting them, Lakewood girls volleyball. So shout out to Lakewood girls volleyball, because they're proving it wrong. Like everybody they do care. These spots do care. So I want to ensure that it's like that equity thing, make sure that these girls and or boys, other athletes are getting that recognition too, not just the top athlete every week. It's not just about awards every week.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that from a coverage standpoint, I think one of the things that you just hit on, which I think is really, really important, is, and as I've, like our YouTube page is like through the roof. We're at like almost 900,000 subscribers now, and we only had 50,000 at the beginning of the year. So we went up 850,000 in 1 year. And part of it was understanding that the content, leveraging other people's content to be able to grow your own stage, and that's I think a big thing, and be able to get people to team and partner on things in this kind of new space with respect to growing, because the old model was, newspaper wise, like, I controlled my content, whatever I came out with. I didn't want anyone else taking that content or pieces of that content. And basically now, because of social media, if you do that, your content is limited to your small market. And then, but if you allow your content to be shared, it goes to markets that you probably never even known before. People who follow the shore still, but live in California, or follow the shore football still and live in Florida, right? And moved and grown up and moved on, and have nieces and nephews and all those kind of things that still live here, right? And not to count people who are throughout the state who maybe moved, and obviously the people who are always here, who have lived here and stayed here. So I think that's the great thing about the way that things can be shared, is that, like, you could take something that a player did, the running back from Point Borough. He had that fantastic run where he broke like 9,000 tackles.
I did get that video though. I was the one on the camera that time.
Yes, and it goes viral, right? It goes crazy viral, like it's everywhere. And then everyone's like, "Oh, that's a shore school, right?" And they see that, and all of a sudden now they're coming up to your site, and they're coming to your Twitter page and all that over and over again. It's an amazing the share the ability to share things, and then have it come back towards you is so incredible. So it's great to see that you're continuing to evolve that part of the network, because like I think that's the whole key to getting kids exposure.
Agreed.
And kids getting recruiting, and kids getting looked at, and schools getting exposure. And I think that the groups that understand that, man, you go exponential. I've seen it happen myself, like exponential. For 15 years with NUC sports camp stuff, we would keep everything to our own kind of world, and like try to draw everybody to us. And once I stopped worrying about that and just let everybody grab whatever they want and shared it, things went through the roof. Through the roof, and it's
a community. That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's a community. It's like, like I said, Asbury Park Press isn't a competitor. Like, we're doing different things anyway, and NJ.com, and whatever, Shore Savages, like, they're just doing their Instagram thing. Like, all these different people doing all these different things. Great. Like, highlight the athletes. That's what it's about. It's not about me as the content creator or business owner. It's not about any of that. It's about them on the field. And actually, and I'm even kind of realizing a little bit about some of the kids not on the field too. I've engaged with schools. So for instance, an example being Tom's River East, talking to one of the teachers that runs with TRE Today, the school newspaper. We're going to do a collaboration with them and it'll be like teacher sanctioned, but kids like that want to actually produce some content, whether it's video or whether it is an article, it'll all be vetted by the teacher. But now we can put that on our page. It's like, and that's great. Now we can highlight them because they're passionate about this stuff too. So it's not.
And you're going to get like now you get kids that are jumping into, the area of expertise that they want to do, right? Like they can learn and kind of go through that and kind of, build their pseudo resume while in high school, having a teacher kind of oversee it, where now it's like a pseudo internship in a way, right? Like, but it's all but it's all for the good of the group. It's good for everybody, right? Like, and now you're just getting more kids involved and all that kind of thing. Like, it's a positive thing no matter what. Like, we've always said too, like for Dave and I, whenever we went into a school was, just any aspect of it, like, hey, do you have a newspaper here? Do you have a media club? Like, they can come film practices. They can come do, take pictures for whatever, like any of that stuff that you can incorporate outside of your program and now bring it into your program just is developmental for everybody across the board. You look at like what college football teams do or any of those guys, they all have, it's way bigger than just coaches, players, X's and O's and all that other kind of stuff. All of that other stuff matters.
Yeah, it's almost like because schools, especially public schools, like you see some of the private schools with it, but like the sports information directors that you see at
Yep.
colleges, it's almost like we are de facto the SIDs for every high school at the shore right now. Not officially, but that's as we kind of build what this network is, and even some of the coaches have access to our back end now, so that they can throw things in there and
Which is amazing.
send us stuff, yeah, like that, and that's it. Like it's not, again, it's not about who created it or who produced it. This is more of like a platform mentality than anything.
Right, which is definitely, it's definitely like a lot of people say it's about the kids, but when it comes down to it, it ain't so much about the kids. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, so the fact that like that's your mission and you could like care less about who gets the credit for it as long as the kids are spotlighted in the right way, shape, or form, like I'm all behind something like that. Like that's 100% how it should be, and unfortunately, not really is.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, you meet a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities, and it's different, and things are said, and I just kind of log it away in the back of my mind, and I know who's who, and I know who's what, I know what certain people are about, and just kind of roll with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's so obviously you're covering Jersey Shore football, which always has its unique amount of drama every single year. And you could start with some of the traditional top teams, right? And maybe go from there. But I think some of the most interesting things are, RBC like really expanding its schedule, at least in the beginning, right? Now they're going to get into the shore schedule, but in the schedule to try and continue to up their ante and figure out what they have to do to continue to become a bigger powerhouse. And they're probably, obviously the first two games probably didn't go exactly the way that they wanted to go. But there's a lot of things I think that they're learning from starting to expand their schedule. Like, have you talked to Coach Lang at all, and what he's doing there and with his program?
I was actually, the other day I was at the girls' soccer game. I was talking to Buddy Houseman about the program a little bit, and I think he's kind of on the same page with it. He coaches baseball there, but it's that concept of, if you want to be the best, you got to play the best.
100%. Yep.
And so the best program, like look at Rumson last year, 5-5, but then they still run. It's about the playoffs. It's about the big one. It's not about, who cares if you're 9-0, but then you lose the first round of the playoffs. It almost doesn't matter anymore because it's all for naught. So people, when they're like, "Oh, RBC sucks now," well, they don't.
You're crazy.
They just lost. They just lost to two top
teams.
teams.
Crazy, dude. They're out of their minds.
They're
crazy.
Yeah.
They just lost to two top teams, like the top team in Delaware, and and they're coming in. They're coming off of back-to-backs.
Right.
They have their senior quarterback. I'll give them. They're a little bit smaller on the line than they're used to, and then they don't have like that central offensive figure and the central defensive figure, not having like the Emmanuel Ross, Davin Brutons of the world. So they're trying to figure that out and develop some guys, but it's all the beginning of the season, man. It doesn't matter if you lose. It's all learning experience so that you get put through the grinder now so that you know what it feels like later on. And some programs get that, some programs don't. They'll try to pad so that they can have a few wins for their kids, and I get it.
Right, you see both sides, 100%. You see both sides of it, but like you said, if you want to be the best, you got to play the best. So here they are. They first time they've ever traveled out of state, right? First time ever. Like that's an experience in itself for anybody that's never been a part of it. To take high school kids on the road, whether you're doing a day trip or whether you're overnighting, like it's an experience. And then you're competing against one of the best teams in Delaware. If anybody does any research on Middletown, just that's all you have to do is just look at what they've produced in the past couple of years, and then to now schedule like back right after that game, you get back and you schedule Bosco from up north, who might not be the Bosco of old, and everybody thinks is like not Don Bosco anymore. But let me just tell you something, like they still play in that big north. They still compete every single week. Like it doesn't matter. So last year they played Bergen, right, and they've played Seton Hall Prep. So you can see Coach Lang what his method to the madness is, and especially especially now with that parochial B being totally revamped with a lot of those new teams in there now. It's no longer a a three-headed horse race with with just DePaul, RBC, and St. Thomas in there. Like now you're going to throw in some other big hammers, and you're going to have to compete down the road and down the stretch. And I think he does a great job up there with his program. People can say what they want about public, private, and all that, but he still has a great program that does what they're due. And I'm telling 0-2 is not any indication of like what they are as a team.
Yeah, I think it seems like he's trying to get more into that. Like they do reload, like they're in between the reload and rebuild kind of thing.
Right. It's like a reload, but you still have to develop those guys, right? Like and every other, you can't just have hammers across the board every single year. Sometimes you got to go with some younger guys.
Well,
like
he's got a great freshman group of kids that came in. So I it's obviously, we all know Mike. But I think what he's really done is I like that he's taken that on, and I think
I do too.
What Derek said is really true. Like, listen, Don Bosco, St. Peter's, all those schools of Bergen Catholic, St. Joe's, like, even if those schools are going 5-5 in a year,
yeah. Like I don't know if they understand
they're
who
still
they play
going
every
through a
week.
meat grinder
Every week.
Del Barton, they all play each other. So when you get to play one of those schools and then you play an out-of-state game, I think it starts to really. Now they're going to go into shore conference schedules. So those guys who are like, "Oh, are they?" They're going to probably find out that they're pretty good.
Real quick. Not to mention, like, I don't know. You could probably do some research and say, when's the last time RBC started a season 0-2? So if you think those guys aren't packing a little bit of an extra punch this week, like, it is what it is. But. So like I said, it's just I don't think other people understand the strength of schedule that those guys up north play every
How
single
about
week.
whether you see, like, so Antonucci obviously stepped down, and that's where the town I live in, after 30 years, I guess, of being the head coach, building a mega powerhouse at Middletown South. Literally, he's the person that built the program. They had some success there before him, but literally the monster amount of success was in his years, almost pretty quickly from the time he took over in the 90s, like as a young coach. As they did the research on it, he had a lot of success pretty quickly. And then obviously, the no Sean Moreno years, 2015, I think it was, also when they were ranked number 1 in the whole state, most recently.
Right, as a public school, like, that's crazy.
So what are you seeing going on over there? Because Mid-North, oh, by the way, has a fantastic coach who coached in the NFL for many years, quietly over there, trying to continue to build that program. So what have you heard about stuff like over on the South side?
So obviously he's going to need to build, his own culture around it for sure. It's, you can't just try to replicate. You got to do your own thing. I can kind of attribute this one to what I'm seeing across the shore is this little, and this is across sports as well. There's almost this little bit of rebalance going on. Yeah. I've noticed where so maybe the top team was here and the bottom team was here. Now the top team's here and the bottom team is here, where they're still up here and they're still,
right.
They're all it's kind of the equilibrium a little bit. And I'm kind of seeing that in a lot of different ways. So I think a spot like Middletown South, they'll have guys. What the tough thing for him going in there is going to be this, some of the recruiting stuff that goes on now and pulling kids out of school and middle school and sending them to different places and being able to choose where you want to go. And, all that stuff's going to be a challenge for any coach. But up in Middletown, when you're close to RBC and when you're close to St. John Vianney and you're close to some of these other spots, that it's got to be tough. It's got to be hard to keep a kid engaged. And it's, you see it happen in college where it's like coaches just didn't want to deal with some of that stuff. Yep. They stepped down. So I don't know like where the power dynamics exactly lie in that respect, but he's really just going to have to assert a culture, and that's his own culture.
Correct.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Obviously, the other school that's on the around the bend, Rumson, which is just kind of not lost the beat at all. Like you said, even if they lose some games early on because they're running the gamut as a smaller school playing
Right.
against bigger schools.
Always.
But you could just see like they always have like some gigantic the powerful running back, some gigantic quarterback who could sling it. If they let him sling it 40 times, he could, but they don't. Like it's one of those things, right? Because that's not their philosophy. But you see the guy, and all of a sudden he throws a vertical pass down the field, like a dime.
And you're like, whoa, I didn't know he could throw like that. Like,
I was
where did
wondering
that
if
come from?
Rumson just opened the game up. I wonder
It's
if they
like he
would
could do
score
that every
45
time if he
points every
wanted to.
game.
Yeah.
But they got, big line, usually big linemen, good athlete, decent to really good athletes everywhere, and a multitude. Like I would say, maybe the biggest public school roster as far as number of
Oh
kids.
my God, they're always 20 to 20. Like 20 to 20. There's dudes everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, does this whole, like, they're a group too. Does this whole school play football? Because every single one, it's like nonstop. They're just a wave of dudes coming out of that locker room. It's incredible.
I think it's a town culture around it, because when you have the same like playbooks and uniforms and logos and all that stuff all the way down to the youth level, they come up through it, and there's a pride around it. So I think like that pride is really what develops and what creates that. And Rumson, man, like I liked O'Toole coming in the last year, because I'm a big fan of the whole multi-sport thing. I know certain people will say otherwise, but to me, I don't know if it's a money grab because they want them to pay for travel, whatever. But O'Toole was like a phenomenal pitcher. Like his sophomore year, I guess his sophomore year, he had like 22 innings, like 1 earned run, something stupid. And so I really liked him going into last year. And then he was a little banged up. Like I know his foot bothered him, and I think that kind of threw him off. That's, the interception numbers were higher. He was at like 13 interceptions last year. But man, saw him a couple times last year, and I saw him week 1 versus Point Boro. That is a different kid. He took a ginormous step forward. He's legit. He's gonna be something for sure. And only a junior this year. Rumson's gonna have a good year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I remember seeing him. I think it was last year, Derek, when you were at Vienna and you guys scrimmaged them, and I saw him. I was like, oh my God, that kid's gigantic. And he was only a sophomore at the time, like
and
gigantic.
You can definitely attest to the culture thing too, right? Because when we were coaching at the street or at the school down the street, like it was just one thing after another with like, the school up the street and the purple school and this and that. And it's like, you just could tell that like sports really matter throughout that entire building, male, female, like whatever it is. But that football program, even losing, the old man, right? And like now the younger guy, like his son taking over and whatnot, and just the whole culture itself, like it is just so intact and so like tight knit that like, and I always say winning breeds winning, right? Like when like you said, when it's the same uniforms, it's the same stuff over and over and over, and you've just won, when you go down 14-0, it's like, oh, we're going to win. We're okay. You know what I mean? Whereas a lot of teams just put their head in the tank and it's over. But that's like, it's just a culture there. And in high school football, like culture wins a lot.
And I think his receivers are better this year too. Not that his receivers were bad last year by any stretch of the meaning, but Nick Thomas, he gives me like that Bill Belichick receiver look. He just kind of everywhere, all over the field, fast, good hands. Like, he had that 62-yard catch to pretty much open up the game. But that kid was everywhere. So he's great. They have a lot of weapons.
They do. And remember, another year of starting in the system, right? Like, it's just like when you play games, that game experience, that stuff matters, right? Like, as a sophomore to jump in there and be the QB at Rumson, like, that's a lot to put on your shoulders. I don't care who you are, right? So another year settled into it. And at the end of the day, they're going to play defense, smack you around, and they're not going to commit penalties. So they're going to play clean games where, look, if they're in it with 2 minutes to go, like, I'm pulling for the purple guys. Like, that's just how it's going to work because they're used to winning.
Yeah. But don't sleep on Point Boro, though, too.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
that's a whole nother.
So that's another.
They're a machine. They're an absolute machine.
Yeah. So triple option, right? I mean, when my first years of coaching, when I coached Battlebrook in North Jersey, we ran the same exact offense that they run at Point Boro. The Navy it's that Navy triple option, that midline. the double wing, and it's a killer,
Beast.
killer, and Raritan was running a version of that, obviously, as well. But when you're really rolling on that, and you got, when you have most times people do it because they originally don't have the linemen. But
Correct.
what ends up happening a lot of times in that offense is once you start to have some success because you don't have those linemen, all of a sudden you start to get those linemen who like to just run block. Because
it's over.
I always think, like, if I was a lineman, what's more fun, pass pro or run block, right? Run blocking is more fun. It's just because you see the NFL and you see college football guys throwing the ball a lot, kids think, oh, pass blocking. No, run blocking is fun because it's basically you get to hit the guy, drive the guy off the ball, and get pancakes. So once that mentality gets in there, and Point Borough has done a fantastic job of doing that, and they seem to just continue to refill. I also think that's one of the nice things about that offense is there's those guys that you need, like the wings, like that's your fast guy. Your fullback is your guy that's going to continue just to plow ahead, get yards, and your quarterback can be primarily an athlete, a runner who is a functional passer, right? And most high schools can find those three guys skill wise, and then everything else becomes a bonus.
Yep.
And I think Point Borough has done a phenomenal job of leveraging that, and over the years continue to build on it. At first it was up and down, and just now it's just rolling. Talk about Point Borough.
So with that, it's like even when you know what play is coming every single time,
doesn't matter.
Background. I don't know. It doesn't matter. They can still do it, and obviously they still put up the points. They still had the big runs. The only thing is, I there was a couple times that I wish that they would just be like, all right, in this situation, like let's fake them out. Let's do a play action or something. Something a little bit different. If I feel like if they could find a little bit more balance, it doesn't have to it can be like 80-20 instead of 90-10, and I feel like they could that could take them really far because you're going to prepare for Point Borough the same way every time, and you're either going to stop them or you're not. And Rumson didn't stop them in the beginning. They found a way to stop them for a couple drives, but their offense was too explosive to keep up with. And Point Borough still fought back. Like it was a game. Even on that sideline, like you said, they didn't think it was over when it was the third quarter. Like they were still grinding it out, and that's because with that style offense, like you said, you're just doing it. You're repetitive over and over and over. And then Coach Saab, man, like that guy just hit the culture around him, the passion around him, and the efficiencies of how he operates. That's what makes that program go.
I think that's a great way to put it, is efficiency, right? Because if anybody's ever seen them practice, like they practice, and I'm telling you, when it is structured, I mean, you're out there, it looks like a college practice from, everybody knows their responsibilities, everybody knows where they're going, what they're doing, they're moving, they're flying around, hot, this spot to that spot. It is run like a college program, and you can see that his players, they care. Like they're not just passionate about, the borough on their jerseys, right? Like they're passionate for their coach. They play for him. And like I said, high school football is a lot of emotion, and it's a lot of those types of things with the culture that's instilled, and they have it over there, and they just continue year after year. The names change a little bit, right? But it's the same system, and they're doing the same stuff. Maybe something else is just highlighted here or there. And they also play some good teams, right? Like they're not just like going along with whatever. Like they got to pack punches and take punches every single week. And like you said, I think that prepares guys for the playoffs when it comes down to it, because now you've played some of those hammers, all season. And like you said, like if you get in the playoffs at 5-5, but you've played, you've been in those 5 losses, like you're going to be in a very good spot to make a deep run here in November.
Scott, I'll tell you what's interesting about that, because you brought up the 90, instead of 90-10, a little 80-20, right? So having coached in it, that was literally my first assistant coaching job. And the Saddlebrook at the time was a powerhouse in that exact offense. That's what they ran. And I came in as they were a power. So my first year coaching, we were 10-1. Okay, we were 10-0, and we lost to Glen Rock, and that was always our traditional battle. Like we'd beat them in the regular season, then they would get us a lot of times in like the semifinals of the playoffs. And what was interesting was that used to be our exact debate as assistant coaches with the guy who was our offensive coordinator, who was a phenomenal coach, right? And the head coach was Darren White, who's also a legendary softball coach. But Darren
Legendary.
was a CEO kind of head coach, and the coordinators really ran their kind of deal. And what was really interesting was because we had two phenomenal receivers that first year, and then we ran the next year we had this unbelievable running quarterback, which Derek knows. But we had two phenomenal receivers, and our quarterback that year was actually a fantastic passer. But our system was
Wasn't warranted.
so structured, and it was the offensive coordinator's son. This is what made it so wild, right?
You would
Because
think he would want to be letting him chuck it all over, right?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is the offensive coordinator's son was a solid runner, good runner, but he was a phenomenal passer. But because the system was the system and the way that we practiced it and everything like that, so heavy on the pitch, the pitch phase, the dive phase, and the reads, and then the passing game was kind of an afterthought. I was the guy who coached the receivers at the time, and we used to always joke that listen, if a ball comes our way, we'll go get it. But we would try to count how many pancakes we got as stalking people versus how many catches, because we had more pancakes than we did catches.
Right.
But that was kind of our joke. But it's interesting you say that, because that used to be our debate. And when we lost in the semifinals, that was like a big maybe we should have threw the ball, because we had these 2 6'1" receivers who were phenomenal. Like you throw it up, they go get it, kind of guys. And it was always the debate. And even the next year when we had this kid, Anthony Pomo, who was like a 10, 700-meter dash kid, right? But he also could sling it. It was always the debate, like when you got in these battle back and forth games when another team was basically as good as you, could you open it up a little bit more because you had the dudes to do it? And so it's interesting to hear you bring that up, but it's really because of the practice. That's why I really learned from all of it, is because the way you practice that triple option, the way the system is so structured, I think is very difficult for an offensive coordinator to really go completely out of the box and off of that system and start to sling it a little more, because it's like you're drawn back to, if I just stick to my knitting and do what I'm going to do, I'm going to score 28 points every game, And if I somehow start throwing, well, all of a sudden I'm at 7-14, and my head coach starts looking at me, or the fans are looking at me like, why aren't you just doing what you do? It's an interesting dilemma, and you see it even with the armed forces academies, with Army, Navy, Air Force, right? They run it. But every time some of them have gotten a little bit out of it, and then all of a sudden they've lost a few more games than they used to lose. And I don't know, it's a phenomenal offense, but it's a weird quandary you get into. Like if you wanted to throw more, do you take away about how good you run that triple option?
Yeah, it's like that the value of that 3 to 4 yard game every time stacks up, and then if you throw and you don't get the 3 yard game, 4 yard game, then maybe it eats at it, I guess.
Yeah, and do you have enough passing plays in the system, that can get you the yards to make up for that, right? Because a lot of the stuff is off play action. You're going down the field, or some sort of a boot off of it, and it's not a ton of I don't know, rollout where you're running comebacks or curls, and you're not doing that all day long. You're not practicing it all day long either. So you're practicing passing very little, right? So, but it's very, very interesting. I think you brought up a great point, because I having coached in it and knowing what it felt like, you always had this feeling like, wow, we have a guy that can do it. I wonder why we don't more, but I've always thought it really had a lot to do with the system. I don't want to belabor the point, but the Point Borough was so interesting because of the system they run, and they've had a lot of success with it. And that's
and those kids are hammers. Like you look at them, Majority of those guys are in the weight room on the regular. Like they might not with the abs and all that, but they are strong as oxes, man. Like every single one of them, the big thighs, the thick bodies, like you can just tell that the weight room is an extremely important factor in what they do and in coach's program. Like that's just kind of how it is. And those guys across the board are strong as hell.
Well, after I was actually out of practice this summer, and at the end of it, practice was over. Offensive linemen, all of them as a group, out on the field doing sprints. Practice is over. They don't have to do it, but they're doing it. So I mean, they put in that work.
Culture wins every time.
TR North.
We had this a little. Scott and I were chatting about this a little bit.
And we know their quarterback obviously very well, just like we know the Vienna quarterback very well, played in our club team. But TJ takes over, and it doesn't seem like they miss a beat. They still got tons of athletes everywhere. They obviously have a phenomenal line. They have maybe one of the best linemen in the country. What are you seeing with TR North this year?
Yeah, I felt good about them coming in. Really because of being at that RBC game last year. I know they lost it, but before the remarkable Ross catch, and the crazy ending that ensued, I mean, TJ was the story of that game. I mean, he
100%.
was phenomenal. And so, even if Micah was down for any reason, it didn't matter. So coming into this year, another year older, and the program being in his control, I had no negative thoughts about him coming in. And he's, I talked to him a little bit at the 7-on-7s, and you can just tell he's dialed in, he's ready to go. And the thing that goes underrated, I think, with Toms River North, because they always had the Micah Fords and they have the explosive offense, is the value of their defense. And some of those guys, there's guys there like Nasir Jackson, that kid, he might not have a lot of stats, but that's because he's a blanket. Nobody's throwing his way. Like he is so good on defense,
fast
and so underrated.
He's a threat in all three phases of the game if he wants to be, right? He could be a wide out DB and a return threat every single time. He's what we call like one of these a big play guy, right? Like anytime he touches the ball, he has the ability to go the distance every single time, no matter what the play call is.
I don't know how he's uncommitted. I mean, I don't know how everybody's not trying to get him. I mean, he's phenomenal.
Yeah, you don't know. Maybe there's some other things academically. It could be
maybe. I don't want to.
Yeah. But he is athletically, and what he can do on the field is absolutely phenomenal. And obviously they have Mordecai and they've got a multitude of they seem to be able to replenish the athlete fold, whereas some of the other TR schools are not able to do that as well. Can you, because this is my ignorance, because I really just, obviously I've been down here 7 years in the shore or 8 years in the shore, but I don't really know much as we get towards like Ocean County as well, right? Talk to me a little bit about like how is it that coach is Oz is such a great coach? Is that and his brothers coach with him? They've been able to build a phenomenal culture, and the others have gone up and down. Are there dynamics there that are different in each school? I really just don't know. I'm asking that purely out of ignorance.
Yeah. So, first and foremost, he's an incredible coach. That's
right,
hands down. But the history of Toms River being that they all were powerhouses in all sports. I mean, I grew up, I was a mid 2000s kid. So, Toms River East in every sport, Toms River North, Toms River, they were all just phenomenal in everything. And I kind of get the feeling that a lot of it has to do with just the generalized funding of how the Toms River schools are right now is what's kind of creating some of these like paradoxes where, because like even like Toms River North soccer, they got like 80 kids coming out for that soccer program. They're great. But then on the baseball side, they couldn't even field a freshman team. So, there's just these like weird dynamics where, so it almost seems like certain kids target different Toms River schools for different things. It's like, I'm going here for football, or if I play this sport, I'm going here, as opposed to it just being like, that Toms River, really, you call it like the 90s Toms River mentality. It kind of seems like that's there's a big shift there.
Can you
It's not the
choose?
same way.
You
Are
can
you
pick
able
where
to
you go.
choose at Toms River, or
I
is there
mean,
lines and it's kind of like
I mean, there's lines and all that stuff, but I mean,
If you want to get it done,
they
you can
still
get it
do.
done.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
They find a way to get to where they need to be, right? And
Right.
obviously, Oz has built a culture there at Toms River. So
Right,
if
why
you're a
wouldn't you
football
wanna go
player,
there?
that becomes the place that if you're really good at football. And one of the things I know, just because I'm in youth football now over in Middletown, Toms River now is like consolidated all their youth programs, so all those kids play together as they're coming up. So my guess is that if one program is really phenomenal, like Toms River North has been, that they start to think to themselves, if I'm going to go to a public school, this is where I want to play football. I'm guessing. I really don't know for sure, but I think that, when you have all the kids in one program, they're probably all hanging out with each other after a certain point. You know what I mean? So they start to, get an affinity for each other. But Tom's River is really, it's incredible how good they are. I mean, literally, last year they were the one school that could really compete with RBC, and at that level. And it was that was a phenomenal game. Some other, so what are some of the other schools that you see that are really starting I mentioned, Zach LaBarker obviously being over at Vienna, the impact he's already had over there with Acosta and those guys starting now. We'll see as they get into the meet in their schedule, but he's a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal quarterback. We have, we saw him live, and they have Dante Capagna at receiver there, and Abdul at running back. So they obviously have some weapons over there.
He's different.
But what schools are you starting to see that you think are going to be kind of emerging teams this year?
Well, obviously, you mentioned SJV. I still have I'll admit, I still have the question mark. Do I believe the hype or do I not? I'm still feeling that out. If Acosta stays around, I think, obviously they're on the up and up. But there's a lot of young coaches out there too in some of the smaller programs, or the ones that aren't the big names of the conference, that are really interesting because of the cultures that they're building and some of the pride into their programs. You've got Jarrett Pigeon at Central, and sure, they haven't had a ton of success yet, but the work that he's putting in and some of the stuff that they're doing, just the athletic program in general at Central, I know the school has some issues, and that's a whole different thing, but they're really trying to create something and build something there. So I see that. You got Tommy Farrell over at Manchester, same thing. I mean, it's, the whole "it's just Manchester" thing is real. Like, he's creating something. He comes from Donovan, played there. He knows what it means to win. And, look, 3 years in, and he's created something. Tierney down at Pineland.
There's another one, right? And how fortunate those two play each other this week, right? Like, but they've both of them. Like, it's just like you said, to see everybody be successful, right? And then, like you said, some of these, I guess how people would look at it like, oh, these guys, it's just what they do. They just, they'll go 500 or they're losing this and that. Like, perhaps some of these young guys, and kind of, like you said, the entire conference is kind of shifting a little bit. And Dave and I have talked about this when you're looking at guys like, Antonucci stepping down and Cosentino at Shore stepping down. Some of these like long time head coaches within the conference itself have now stepped down. And now you're seeing the rise of like some of these other younger guys at some of these non-traditional powerhouse programs within the Shore itself. Like, now you're starting to see the success that they can have as well, right? So it's kind of like a changing of the guard a little bit,
Definitely. It's funny because, and I don't know how true, accurate, it's just kind of like a opinion of what I've seen, and this goes across sports, is as some of these programs turned over, I'll use Central as the example. The girls soccer program had turned over, and they ended up going and winning South Jersey Group 4 last year. They had some major talents, but some of those things, it's like all these schools, all the kids are the same age. Yeah, some are a little bit bigger, some are a little smaller, but there really is so much on the ability to get stuff out of them, like as a coach. The one of the coaches I know well, worked with them. He said it's like you're a part-time psychologist, or actually probably even a
100%.
full-time psychologist.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I think especially now, like I grew up in a little bit of that. There was the old school mentality. Some of the new stuff was coming, but it's not, you can't just like tell them to grind and like, don't like, wow, for some reason that like when we were younger, it was like water is weak. Like you don't need a water break. It's like these
Totally
kids care
different.
about health and wellness. They care about the way that they're presenting themselves. They care about a lot of different things that I think old school guys might not quite get.
They don't.
But if you can tap into it and you can kind of embrace some of those different elements, I think that's why Tierney is such a great example. You know, he's taking his selfie after the games and all that. You know, he gets that buy-in from them, and it's just trying to get more out of the athlete. And then because of that, they also become a better team and better people overall growing up. So it's, you know, it's not even about always the recruiting. If you just play high school sports, you learn how to be a teammate, you learn how to be a team member, and that carries with you into your whatever job it is. It doesn't matter what industry it is. And I think that's like what a lot, you know, everybody wants to be a professional athlete, but the breakdown goes, there's like 8 million student athletes across America. There's 500,000 NCAA athletes, and then there's like 20,000 professional athletes. The odds are not in your favor. It doesn't matter who you are.
Correct.
And so it's like, use this as a tool, as an opportunity to like build something for yourself and as a teammate, and go have some fun and win. Cause that's, you know, winning isn't everything, but at the same time, winning is a lot of fun.
Yeah. And for some of these kids, like high school football will be the last time they ever put on a helmet, you know? So
Yeah.
if you're not, you know, if you're making it a bad experience for them, they're going to want no part of it. And they're only going to tell others, like, don't do this. Right. So
Yeah.
it's just, you got to stay positive. Coaching has changed so much, you know, in those terms of being, you know, a shrink on top of being whatever else for them. But you can't just like hammer a kid and do all that other kind of stuff. And the quote old school mentality of coaching, like it doesn't work with these guys. Like maybe you have one or two of those guys, but like, you know, you got to know your players, each one of them. You got to know what buttons to push and not push depending on your players. You got to know your team, right? Like if you know that, it's just like teaching. You got to know how they all learn and all that other kind of stuff. Like a lot of that stuff goes into it now. You know, it's, you can't just cookie cutter the whole thing, and you know, you got to be a tough guy and do all this stuff. Like that's a part of it, but it's not all of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's two things. I think that you know, football in general, there is a tough guy element to it. So, you know, in order to have a certain level of success, you're going to have to be have a certain level of physicality in order to be good. And I point to Rumson as a place that seems to really embrace that as being part of their culture. Right? Is that they're a physical group? Same thing with Point Borough. You know, there are groups like, look, TR North. They under Ford. They were run the ball downhill, right? With TJ, they're doing both. They're running and throwing. They maybe got a little more finesse. SJV maybe a little more finesse, right? But it's the kind of thing where there's a balance to success in high school football. There's a group of kids that are there that love to hit, love to be physical. There are a group of kids that are there that are athletes, and blending all of that is I think the ultimate, like, the key. And then obviously years put in, that becomes, you know, in high school football, to me, it still be culture. It's the more time you're able to be there and start to have success, the more, you know, it builds on itself. And the more people rely on the fact, because a lot of kids don't have the ability to have stability, but when they see stability over and over again, they think, okay, there's an opportunity here for success, which is a unique thing that I think is happening to Shore. And maybe you could talk about this. I don't know if it's a youth movement per se, but it's a turnover movement, no doubt about it, as far as from a coaching staff standpoint with respect to football, where there's, in the last couple of years, there's been so many jobs that have been open.
Very rare.
Before that, there was almost no jobs open in the Shore, right? Talk about that kind of turnover that you've seen, and that could be partially guys being older and retiring, and also partially the game changing a little bit with respect to coaching? Talk about some of the stuff you see, and you may see it in other sports if you see in
I'm
that
sure you do.
other
The
sports.
coaching
Talk
turnover,
about
it's
that too.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, well, just a quick touch on a point before that is it's almost, I guess what it is like with it, it's almost like controlled physicality. It's definitely a physical game, but
Right.
but to be able to harness it and control it, to be able to put everything into that one play, but then still like respect the game and respect the opponent. That's like, you used to have like, chaotic kids that would just want to run people over, like they'd run their own guys over on the sideline just because they couldn't turn it on and off. So harnessing some of that is, I guess, a little bit of it, but
Absolutely.
with the coaching turnover, like I guess I'm not well versed on exactly why, because I am seeing it and I'm curious. My gut though tells me a lot of it has to do with dealing with parents. I think that wears on you after a while.
Oh yeah.
My kid should be in, or my kid should be doing this or that, and then with the differences of how the game is played, that some of them, it just gets to that point where it's like, okay, like I did this. There's really no what's the upside for me continuing versus not continuing. So again, I can't speak too well on it just because I haven't talked to any of them really directly since,
Right.
but that's just kind of the sense that I take from it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And like I said, Blake, when I first came down here, like I was like one of the only new coaches, and then but within a couple of years, it was all of a sudden it was like in the last few years it really turned over a lot. And maybe COVID had a little bit to do with that.
A little
It
bit
could be.
gave
Probably.
people a taste of like, hey, if I don't have to do this right now. I just think also like, the parents are obviously one, but two, just now the time that it takes. Like you're no longer a seasonal coach as a football coach. Like it is 365 days a year, 7 days a week with recruiting and whatnot. Just because you're not out on the field practicing, in helmets and shoulder pads or game planning doesn't mean that you're not working. You're still with them in the weight room and you're monitoring like all the recruiting that's going on, or you're developing this, or you're developing that. Like if you're not doing those things, then you're going to be falling behind. And look, at the end of the day, like the pay isn't anything. And obviously, like you don't do this for the pay and whatnot. But when you're working that many types of hours to just give something back, like, a weight room stipend or something would really entice these guys to maybe do a little bit more. But who knows? Like, I just think there's a totally change within football itself that now the time that has to get put into being a football coach, like it's not a seasonal stipend anymore. It is a year-round position. And, you're working on a year-to-year contract too. There's no real protection for coaches. Like there's a lot of that type of stuff that goes into it where you're literally coaching half of the year, taking care of your program, babysitting it, doing this, doing that. And at the end of the day, like they could tell you in June, like, hey, you're done, you're gone, and we're gonna bring in somebody new. Like that's just kind of the it is what it is. Like that's just what we live in and how we do it. It's a whole interesting dynamic.
No, very, very. So I think you'd said Tierney. Is there anybody else that we missed that you think are you talked about Pineland, you talked about Manchester. Any other program? We talked a little bit about SAV. Any other programs that you think are? Because I thought Wall the first two games were, again, what's interesting about the Shore is you don't know if someone's actually down or not, because that's one of the interesting. Like there are teams that were on top one year and then next year they're in a rebuilding year, and that happens a lot in public school. So I don't know exactly all of that, but like Wall seems to be doing pretty, having a little rebuilding off of the things that had happened there, and I think that's a pretty interesting. And then there was another one that I thought that was doing really well.
Can I say about Wall real quick?
Yeah, sure.
So Wall, as a definitive statement, I'll say Wall football is back.
Okay.
Wall football is back.
Nice.
It's
okay.
I saw them this summer a little bit in practice, but then I saw the Colts Neck game. I know Colts Neck's down a little bit, but no, that team is back. They, even after the game when they just stomped on Colts Neck, it was still, hey, like they kicked 2 field goals, and why are we doing that? We need to be like, I want to score touchdowns,
They
but I
were
want to kick
pissed.
field
They were
goals.
pissed. Yeah.
It's like they knew that they could have been better. The players knew they could have been better. It wasn't celebratory after the game. It was back to business. We got our home opener next week. It's that program is legit, and yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I see like Tony Creasy has emerged as a star, right? And then
Yeah.
they've got other guys that are emerging as stars.
Yeah.
That
Derek Boss.
We had Derek Boss.
Their sophomore quarterback, legit. He's legit.
Quarterback is
Stud.
excellent. Yes,
Stud.
Excellent quarterback. And it's a place that has obviously has had a phenomenal tradition. You go to their youth program, they're always very good. So it's a place that's really it's great to see that Wall is back in the mix there. Having
The
a
short
good
is better when Wall is good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and things like that. When some of these teams are relevant and like, competitively, like, because look, to me, it's a very like ultra competitive conference itself. Like every team is pretty good, right? Like I would match up some of these teams to some of the teams across the state in general on any given Saturday or Friday night, whatever. But like when certain teams are better, the entire conference gets better, like for the sake of it. So it's good to see that they're back up and kind of in the flow of things too. I think Howell could be an interesting one too, right? So they got a big one against Brick Memorial this week. Coach has done a great job over there, like rebuilding that and making it something, a big Group 5 program, right? And now they got to play Brick Memorial, who's 2-0, and believe me, those kids can play too. So that should be a good one. Nice little early season 2-0 versus 2-0, like who's going to come out of it type gig. So I like that one
and
too.
Homedale might have the best quarterback in the whole Shore Conference, right? So
that dude.
Yeah, I mean
he's different.
Yeah. He's got that next level arm for sure right out of the gate. So it's obvious.
He might be a better lacrosse player from what I hear. Like, he's an absolute stud in both. So that should be enticing, right? Two towns right next to each other, right? You got SJV right there and Homedale going there. And with another new first-year head coach, right, who's done a great job of taking something that was built a certain way and tweaking it to work with what his roster has. And that's just, who knows where that goes.
The quarterback thing is funny, okay, because that's got to be like he's got the genes element of it, like the DNA element of it, because even his sister's was a stud athlete or is a stud athlete.
Hooper, right? Basketball.
Yeah, yep. Allison, I think is her name. Yeah,
Allison,
she's solid. That just everything about that family is just they're just full of studs. So
they're bred.
And then to be able to take that and actually like put it into a team system, that's some kids can be athletes, but if you can't put it together, then it doesn't matter. It's wasted talent, but I don't think it's wasted talent there.
No, and he was already the guy last year doing a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and having to do other things too within that system and what they did. And they ripped off, what were they, 9-0, something like that? Like they ripped off an incredible season doing something different, right? And now here comes a whole new regime, and like, let's go. Let's see kind of how they roll with it and go. And like you said, they're playing against a pretty good Brick Memorial team that, like they can play. So it's a good early season. Like, let's test how the waters are, I'm sorry. They're playing SJV. Who wears the hype, right? Like, is that real? I know that Abdul Toure is an absolute phenomenal running back. Like my man is like he is a different level player, 100%. The roster is excellent. So we'll see, right? And that the little Homedale SJV being in the same town thing, I think that's kind of underappreciated in a way, like, because that's a rivalry that I think is a little bit bigger than people realize in terms of like literally being in the same place. And it's going to be a live LA atmosphere, so that should be a really good one tonight too as well.
The best defense is going to win that game because that's what
100%.
Homedale had last year. It was all the shutouts if you think about it. I mean, sure the offense was good and they produced.
Yeah, I think they ripped off like six or seven shutouts in a row at one point last year.
Yeah, something like that. And that defense was good, but then obviously they were in a little bit of a battle with Long Branch. It was 30, mid 30s. So they definitely need to figure out if they can bring that what they had defensively back and get that stuff rolling. But I could see it being the same thing. It could be a little bit of a shootout here with SJV if neither defense can stop them.
Yeah. And believe me, anybody who's been in the Shore Conference for a couple of years, talking about Homedale being in a shootout is kind of funny to think about, right?
Yeah.
With the changing of the guard coming from what they've been the last couple of years. So it should be a good one.
Well, Scott, it's been fantastic. Shore Sports Network, Go there. I know I noticed the like rebranding going on as far as color scheme and all that kind of stuff. Really cool to see that starting to get evolved and updated. Anytime you want to come on and talk, I mean, any season, even though obviously we do a lot of football stuff, but we'll talk anything sports anytime. So
Whatever
we're
you want
glad
to do,
to
we'll
talk
do it.
about it. And obviously we live in the shore, so it's familiar with kids that we know, so it's great to talk sports with you, and we love your content. Continue to
Keep it up,
follow
man.
it. Yeah, it's a great thing, and like I said, it's unique. It's a unique thing. I wish more.
Yes.
You see a lot of it in the South. What you're doing here is what you see in the South. It's meaning the southern part of America, right? They do have a lot more of these like local networks, and whether it's social media or websites that are following them. What you're doing, you're bringing that sports element, so everyone can really get enjoyment. And like you said, the parents getting the opportunity to have the enjoyment of seeing their own kids covered, which I always thought, back in the old days in the newspapers, and you know this well too, was the greatest thing that they've basically done away with. Where my favorite used to be you get you look at the box scores of every game, right? And
Every
you'd have
game.
the box score who scored, and there was nothing better than seeing your name, your friend's name on there, and seeing every score on there, so you could see a team you played, right? And that's what you're bringing back. And it's just online. It's no longer in the newspaper, but it's online. And I think that's so important, man. Like that was my favorite thing as an athlete. I'm sure Derek would say the same thing. You'd open up the paper the next morning, and it was football, whether basketball season, for me, like track I was a track athlete. Like I'd see the times of what I ran in the paper. Baseball players would see what they did. So wrestlers, and I think the fact that you're doing that and you put it's in a digital format, and that's how everything is absolutely phenomenal. And it's definitely kudos to you and what you're doing. We're behind 100%.
Yeah, man.
Well,
Awesome.
the other quick piece to it too is by, like I said, creating that hub. So one of the hardest things, even like last year when I took this thing, was just finding like what the actual schedule is. Like there was no centralized short conference schedule. So I literally this summer it'd be like 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of July, and I'm combing through trying to find schedules and porting it all in and creating these rosters. Like even just like basic information like that, we have that all now. So and it's cool because now we can that schedule is actually like a scoreboard function. So I can go in, type the scores in, and now that's showing up. So you can see that the standings populate automatically. Like, so it's kind of like taking, it's a little bit of some of what NJ.com is doing, but not relying on the coaches to do it. I'm plugging it in.
That's awesome.
That's
the
phenomenal too.
Best thing about it. This was the thing, as a coach in North Jersey, right? Obviously, a coach down here. The thing that was the hardest thing was that you would have to, in North Jersey, just was, you would call in the scores, and then they wanted you to put it online. And I used to be like, do I put it in?
You'd have to give them the stats and all the crazy.
Where do I put it? And if some of the technology wasn't always the easiest to use, right?
Yeah.
So you're relying on coaches who have all these things on their plate. The more you take off their plate, right? And
the more
be
they're
able
going to give you
information from them and get all that info. Literally, like I said, the old days, I'm going way back, okay, here, when basically, because my father was a coach for almost 60 years, and the old days, they used to call you, okay, to get your stats, not then they put it on you to fill it in, but they used to call you. We would get like my coaches would get a call, the game would end, a reporter would call him and say, okay, what was your score by quarters? Who was your top players? Who's the other team's top players? Who scored for each team, right? And that, even though there was still some of it on the coach, right? But it was a lot easier because the guy called them up. The coach didn't have to worry about it if it was a home,
the home
all
team
these
is
other things you had to
responsible
deal
for
with after
this.
the game. Yeah, so an injury, and oh my God, I forgot to call on the score. And then the next morning, if you forgot to call on the score, who's calling you immediately. The parents are like, "Where's the score? Where's the stats?" Right? So,
Yeah.
so that was what was great, is how they used to do it. So as the more you do those kind of things, that's my plug for continue to take those things off the coach's plate. And I think it just goes through the roof, because those guys, they get on board with it. Then all the parents are on board with it, and the kids are on board with it no matter what. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But you get all those other parties on board with it, and it goes through the roof. So
definitely.
Scott, thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate it, man.
We'll see you
No,
soon.
thank you.
We'll have you back soon. Anytime you want to come on, reach out to Derek. We'll be glad to talk about it. And a big game happens, something you cover, something that was phenomenal that you want to talk about, we'll bring you on.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Thanks.
All right,
Take
Scott.
care.
Bye. That was great. Great episode.
You're 100% right, though, because if you look at the website now into what he developed, like, you can go to any team page and then click on a roster, and then there's it's just more media savvy, I guess.
Yeah,
and like you
yeah.
said, like, you're not clicking on something and it's going to oh, this is a broken URL or whatever. Like, he just and look, it sounds like the right reasons. It's not about him, it's all about like whatever, covering other sports. I think that's too, like, we know football rules the roost kind of, but to get out there and go with those other sports, like, those girls and dudes, like, they love that stuff too, right? Like, everybody deserves their own little piece of celebrity lifestyle, I guess, as a high school student, because you don't get it.
There's those national hubs like Max Preps, right, that do a great job, broad stroke, nationally, right? And those that want to be involved in that aspect of it, but most people care locally, right? And that is the
Shore conference.
Right, 95% of the and even deeper, like their own town or their own program, right? So
Literally.
some people, obviously, like people who like us, care the whole shore
But
conference.
how many times, like look at all these.
Well, most people care about their team. That's it.
Every Alabama has their own thing. Georgia thing. Rutgers their own. Like, this is what, because
that's
you can
the norm.
Yeah, like, you can
The
get
more
that
niche it is,
you can get that insider information, right? Like,
Yep.
I mean, look, you can even look, like, when we were growing
because
up.
how else can you get it if you're not local? How else?
100%, unless you have somebody on the team and you're talking to a dad or whatever. Like, that's not, like, this is, like you said, like, grandma and grandpa are out in Arizona living their life, but they still want to see what Jimmy's doing back here playing for his high school team. Or, hey, I've relocated to Tennessee, but, like, I still come from this town in the shore. Like, what's going on? Like, they want that type of stuff, that localized whatever. Look at how many subscribers are to, like, the Georgia Bulldog, .org, whatever it is, right? Like, those little individual media sites, like, they get a lot of clout, and then you can get that insider information that maybe somebody else doesn't get, because it's just so broad, right? And, like, you're talking about a nice little 43 team, I think it is 44 team shore conference that's like, cover this, right? Whereas up north, we had, like, when we were growing up, right, you had the Bergen County, you had Bergen Record, you had the Star Ledger, you had the Daily Record, which was like Morris County, right? They covered counties, right, in little, and that was better coverage. So let's try it this way. Like, why not? Like, that's what these guys want. It's really cool.
There's no doubt about it. It's very cool and it's very important. And it's a thing that the families totally like. I mean,
oh God, come on, man, they love this. Like, we see parents, like, just look at the stuff we do when we post pictures or videos of our 7-on-7 content or our flag content. Like, they love this stuff, man. Like, this is what gets, and like, as a parent, of course, like, I want to see little Jimmy out there, like, doing his thing, right? Like, I want to reward, like, show that kind of stuff. Like, this is important, man. Like, there's a reason that even in the highest levels of sports, in our major sports, NBA, NFL, all that other stuff, they have to sit down after a win or a loss in a press conference, and they have to talk to these people that are going to deliver the information to the masses, right? So why can't we do the same with high school sports?
there's no doubt. I agree, and that's what makes this great. So, until next time, that was great. We got a
Maybe we
good
should
break.
make that a weekly spot.
We could, yeah, we could do something.
Like
It
every
doesn't have to
Friday
be as
morning, we'll
long. It
come
could be
in.
a half hour.
Maybe
Yeah,
we'll
it could be
pick like a
shorter.
couple games and like kind of bring them on and do
Two
whatever. And
feature games. Like what
right,
are the two games that were the big games this week that you saw?
yep. And then hey,
And
what else went on in the week? Give us like the rundown. Like, was there a big volleyball game? Was there a big field hockey game? Like, give us a rundown. I mean, because look, to be honest, I'd like to kind of see a little bit more of that stuff because we don't know that world, right?
I don't. Yeah, I mean,
I
honestly,
might be
I
biased because I now have a daughter that could possibly be playing one of those sports, and I need to figure out what the hell's going on because I sure as hell don't know what to do with a field hockey stick, dude. Like,
oh yeah, well, yeah, sure, I'm sure. Yeah, it's a whole different animal, right? So, but yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think that being able to do something that gets them on weekly or bi-weekly, every other week or
yeah,
something that gets that because it really is. First of all, it's interesting to note what are the things that are going on, like who's
right.
doing
And
what.
he's boots on the ground, right?
He's boots on the ground. It's hard, and it's hard to, like you could read, but you really don't know. Like
Right. You don't know
he
the true, like, it's just like when somebody sends a text message, if they send it with no, punctuation, are you pissed? Are you happy? Are you whatever? Like, you're guessing, right? Like,
right.
so he could, I mean, literally, would we have known anything about Wall if he wasn't like, oh no, they're back? Like, oh,
No,
okay.
we know about the guys that we know, but
Correct.
we don't know, I
Like the
didn't know
true
that
pulse
much
of
about
it.
the quarterback. I didn't know that
Right.
much about him, right? I know he's a good player, but I didn't know the intimate details of it, right? It's just
Right.
there's only so much you can that you
Right.
could
And
pay
it
attention.
seems like he's done a very good job of like, bouncing around to every camp. I believe he visited every camp. He did headshots for every single, like he did all that stuff on his own so that he could kind of like he's implementing a lot of the stuff himself. Like hopefully as it continues to grow, he can kind of like, delegate and whatnot so he doesn't get too overwhelmed with it because I'm sure
It
once this
has to be
thing really
overwhelming.
starts running, like I
Yeah,
bet
yeah.
you it's gonna be a lot
Yeah, my guess is it probably is
already.
some, already probably somewhat overwhelming, but that I think that's the part of it, and I think it's really really interesting to see um, what will happen there because I agree the site was like before he's really evolved this the site was it was brutal juice brutal, so
Right, and that's coming from someone who does this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Like
I would go on there and I
you've
would
had
just be like,
websites forever, dude, you know?
yeah, and I'm sure I'm a culprit of it myself, but but it's um, it's just one of those things that you want to get that information, and the more that gets better, the better off I think it'll be. But
Right.
it's really really it's cool to see. It's one of those things that is only going to get better, in my opinion, and everybody really loves the idea
Oh
that
god, yeah.
yeah that they can get information on their team, on a player, on the family member.
And it will hold people accountable, right? Like if, like he said, do you know how hard it was to just find everybody's schedule? Like
I
that's
can't even imagine.
ridiculous to me. Like guys, that's like the bare minimum of what should be done. Like send the right schedule, send the right times, send the right location so everybody's on the same page. Like now if everybody's doing it and now all of a sudden you're the oddball out and you're not doing it, like okay, well I better get on board and send these guys like the right. Plus if you also do right by coaches, athletic programs, all that kind of stuff. Now it's all just going to keep rolling in a positive way and you kind of do your thing, right? Like, so I think he's got a good thing as long as it stays, and continues, which I think he will continue to just kind of move forward and do his thing. It'd be awesome to see it. Like, cause I thoroughly enjoy, the coverage and just to kind of, like I said, these kids work hard enough. They deserve a little love.
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And I think that's an important thing that they continue to get progress in
Like I
there.
said, this might be the only time they're ever highlighted like this in their lives. Like, hopefully not, because they go out to do real big time great things. But hey, who knows?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. All right. Well, until next time.
Next week.
Great episode next week.
All right.
We'll go from there. Let's sign off.